Coming to you direct from the nerve center of the galaxy's greatest comic. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast.
Borag Thang athletes, and welcome to the latest episode of the 2000 AD Thrillcast Lockdown Tapes. I am your host, Mulchar, and on this episode, wow, how special is this going to be? We have Brian Bolland, we've got Dave Gibbons, and we've got Mick McMahon on a Zoom call, chatting away. Wow, brilliant, amazing. Thank you so much to them for agreeing to do this. It was great to be basically a fly on the wall. They've chatted amongst themselves for ages, to swap stories about the beginnings of their careers, how everything interconnected. I followed up on a couple of things from the interview with Brian the other week about the 1970s convention, where everything seemed to come together for a particular generation of artists. Of course, Mick was a lot younger than Brian and Dave, so his first major work was on 2000 AD with Judge Dredd, whereas Brian and Dave had worked together on things like Power Man for the Nigerian market and various other things. So it absolutely wonderful to be able to listen to them chat away. Those of you watching this on YouTube will be able to see various bits of artwork that we post up, and photos and whatnot from Brian's archive. So I'm not going to rabbit on much here because you're here for the main show, really, aren't you? Thank you so much for all the feedback. As I said on the Thrillcast, still getting suggestions through, following them up for potential interviews. So thank you so much indeed for the feedback. And you know what? Let's crack on. Brian Bolland, Mick McMahon, Dave Gibbons. What more could you ask for? Here's just under a couple of hours of chat with three of the biggest legends from 2000 AD. One of the things that we've had lots of really great feedback on the interview chat that we had, Brian, and it's been ages since I've talked to Mick on the podcast and also today. So I guess a good starting point would be to reach back into the abyss of time, because There was a whole conversation we had about that convention in 1972 where everyone seemed to be there, and things really started to kind of come together in terms of there being a community. So I wanted to we'll start off with you, Dave. Try and get your.
Can I just say something?
Oh
yeah. It was at the Waverley Hotel on Southampton Road, because I ended up living in a flat about 4 or 5 doors away from it in 1979. But the convention was 72, Dave, wasn't it?
Do you know, I'm not absolutely sure about that. There may well have been a convention in 72, but the one that I remember was 73, which would have been in the same venue. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that it was 72.
I've spoken to Trevor Goring, and he agrees with you. He thinks it's later than I thought it was.
Yeah, but my memory of it is I can remember meeting you, Brian, and I can remember meeting Angus Mackay for the first time. And I remember that Frank Bellamy was there.
Yes, he was. Yeah, I remember Frank. And I think Terry Gilliam was there too.
Could have been. And also who was there was Bob Monkhouse. He was a very visible comics fan at the time. And I vividly remember the Frank Bellamy panel, because that was just great, because he was so many people's hero, and he was, the leading comic strip artist in Britain at that time.
That's right. And the great thing for us as young people was to go and see these fantastic old artists.
Yeah.
That, were just legendary, and now we're the old artists.
The other thing I remember, which is why I mentioned Bob Monkhouse, and I'm still faintly embarrassed about it to this day, and it also goes to show you what a big mouth I've got. I remember being in the bar there, and somebody said, and I'd just come up off the floor, and somebody said to me, "Oh, is there anything going on down there now?" And I said, I know, it's only Bob Monkhouse throwing his money about at the auction. And they pointed, and he was standing right behind me by that time.
Oh, God.
Looking daggers at me. So that wasn't a very auspicious start, but that's what I remember about it. But to me, that it was a real pivotal thing. The other thing I remember about it as well, and I'm sure it was that convention.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it was. I'm supposed to be the one who's got the best memory here, Brian.
I thought so.
I think it's more like in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, really.
Weren't you the ambassador of comics at one point? Aren't you supposed to know all this stuff?
I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
But
weren't you like the emissary of comics, or you had a title, didn't you?
Well, I wasn't supposed to know everything. We made that quite clear at the beginning. I said, I'm happy to talk, but do I have to know anything? And they said, no, just as long as you talk.
We need to get to a point where Mick gets to be in this story.
So, Mick, were you at the convention in 1972 or 3 at the Waverley Hotel?
No, I wasn't. No.
Why not?
I was still at school.
Still at school? Of course you weren't.
Mick might well have been baby of the group.
Well, I suppose he is, really. You were still at school? Surely not.
I think I might have been at the College of Further Education. I'm not sure.
Because I think we met up, in 73 or 74 or something like that, Mick?
I think it was later than that, because I know that it was because you were in the local paper, weren't you, working for Jethro Tull?
Yeah.
So I wrote you a letter.
You did. Very gracious. Dear Mr. Gibbons.
Anyway, we met up, didn't we? But then we bumped into each other on St Albans Station.
Yeah.
Because I was going up to 2000 AD.
Yeah.
With the first thing I'd drawn, I think.
Yeah, which was the first Dredd then.
I drew, yeah.
Yeah.
And you said that I remember you saying that your agent told you about the comic or something, and but then wasn't long after that I met Brian in the office, and the first thing he said to me was, "Do you actually like comics?"
What I said that.
So I said, "Well, yeah, I do. Yeah, like sheepish, you know. Well, yeah."
I think it's about time you gave us a definitive answer on that one, Mick.
Yeah,
I presume you do.
He was with Nick. Nick Landau was there as well. So, you knew Nick then, didn't you, Brian?
Well, yeah, because I think Nick was one of the 1972-73 Waverley Hotel crowd. So, and I think we all sort of knew each other because a lot of people were doing fanzines at the time. And Nick wasn't he? And was Richard Burton there? Dave? Yeah.
I would think he probably was, because he was a big mate of Nick's. The way it used to work with Nick was Nick had some contacts in New York because he'd been over there with his dad and the whole family.
Yeah.
And the key to Nick Landau, who's a friend of mine to this day, is he has to be the first kid on the block to get the new thing. So he started to import American comics for himself and for his immediate circle of friends, one of whom was Richard Burton, who happened to have a car, so he could drive to Heathrow Airport and pick up Nick's consignment of new American comics. Right. And it was through doing that Nick eventually got into distributing comics and eventually got into being Forbidden Planet and Titan Books. And I did quite a lot of work on fanzines that he published before that. So, I mean, I've known Nick since he was since he was at school, probably 16 or 17. But just going back to St Albans Station, the local paper where I used to live did an article on me. A friend of mine used to work for the local paper, and he found out that I'd done this album cover for Jethro Tull. And I happened to mention to him how much I got paid for it, which at the time was an enormous amount of money. So he said, we're going to do an article in the paper about this. So they did an article. I refused to divulge on the record how much I was getting paid for it. Let me tell you now, 300 quid, eh? 300 quid, what a deal.
Wowzer.
Yeah, but and Mick saw this and he did write me a very polite letter, and I've still got that letter. And in fact, I scanned it the other day because I'm working on my autobiography, and I'm going to reprint Mick's letter. But I mean, it's a very nice letter. And
it's a nice letter, yes.
It's a very nice letter. And Mick came round my house, and I was absolutely knocked out by his work because, you know, I was at that stage where I was a professional, kind of, and people would show me their work, and quite often it was finding the best way to let them down gently. But I looked at Mick's work and I couldn't believe the quality of it, seriously. And I remember we went for a drink, and then we came back and I had to look at it all over again because I was so bowled over. And when I bumped into Mick, in my memory, what you had under your arm were the pencils of the first Dredd story that saw print.
That's right, yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, this is great. And in my memory, I was going in to see my agent anyway. And I thought, wow, this sounds great, this new comic. So I said to my agent, I'd really like to be working on this comic. I know people who are, and it's just the kind of thing that I'd like to do. And I don't think it was that day, but it was maybe the next time I went up that my agent, Barry Coker of Barden Press, actually, I remember me and him got on a bus, went across Blackfriars Bridge, went into King's Reach Tower. He introduced me to Pat Mills, who shook my hand. And then Barry Coker just left me to it because his job as an agent was done. He'd earned his commission for the next however many years. And he did treat me very fairly, actually, Barry. After I've been with him for a couple of years, he said, you're doing so much of your own running around that I don't feel right taking 20%.
Yeah, he said that to me too.
Yeah. Let's call it 15. And then a year after that, he said, let's call it 10. And then when the Americans came calling, he said, oh, well, you know, you've fixed that for yourself, so that's fine. So that's my memories of, you know, seeing Mick, who I considered to be, you know, one lap behind, was now in the lap in front, and he was actually working on the science fiction comic.
So Dave, you actually asked to be in 2000 AD, did you?
Well, I said to Barry Coker, you know, I would love to be in this. And I knew, obviously, Mick was on it. And I knew that Kevin O'Neill was involved with it as well.
I don't think I knew Kev at the time.
No, I mean, I knew quite a lot of the people up in Fleetway by that time. And I'd known Kevin since he was just a sort of bodger, you know, a sort of art assistant or assistant art editor or whatever they called it. So I sort of knew a lot of people involved with it. And it just so happened that they were looking for somebody who could draw kind of people flying through the air, which you and I, Brian, had shown we could do from doing Power Man. And they liked my version. They had about half a dozen other versions of it done, which they didn't like, because Europeans don't quite get skin-tight uniforms without creases.
No.
But us American comic book guys do. So, so that's how...
Can I just put in my 2 penn'orth worth? I seem to remember us having a meeting at Barry Coker's at Barden Press with you and me, and I think Carlos, who I'd never met before, and he introduced me to this new comic called 2000 AD, and I remember being really impressed that it had Jesus Blasco, whose work I loved, doing Invasion in there.
Yeah.
Do you remember that meeting?
I don't actually. I mean, I kind of met Carlos. Didn't you and I go down and visit Carlos in Croydon?
We did. And I think Sandra, his wife, who I think at the time we called Conchita.
Conchita, yeah.
Yes, although on Facebook she calls herself Sandra.
Oh, well, she made us a very nice Spanish omelette, as I recall.
It was very nice.
Carlos,
he's great.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, to me, the thing with Carlos is, the thing that I used to love about his work, it looked like anybody could do it. It was really informal. I mean, nobody could do it, and it was great skill to be able to draw in the accessible way he did. But
actually, Mick could do it.
Oh, well, no, I couldn't actually, because I mean, when they said draw like Carlos, I mean, you have to be really young and stupid to say, yeah, I could do it.
Thank God you were.
Well, and you look at it and you think, well, there's not a lot there really, is there? You know, I can do that. So obviously you can't. So.
But it was the informality of Carlos's work. And I remember going into his studio, and he literally used to draw with a really cheap old sort of fountain pen with hardly any penciling, and everything stank of cigarillos because he smoked like a champion, you know.
Yeah.
And of course his English in those days was really poor, you know. I mean, he could still speak English better than I could speak Spanish, but
oh hell.
So that was
he did an interview late on somewhere, and he was really embarrassed that they had to put subtitles on it. It was, you know, he was speaking in English, but and I don't remember what did Michael. Maybe you know what this was.
I think it was the Future Shock documentary, wasn't it?
It was,
yeah.
Yes, and he was kind of embarrassed. I remember him saying over the phone that they had to put subtitles on that.
It's weird because I had him on the podcast a couple of times, 3 times, and you know, it's an audio medium, and he was absolutely fine. I kind of understood every word, but by that point I'd known him for best part of a decade, I think.
Yeah,
it's interesting, Dave. I remember when because this is the thing you remember. You said about Carlos and his fountain pen. I remember when you told me that, and I sort of furtively crept into Smith's, bought myself a couple of fountain pens, and spent ages trying to get them to work with Indian ink.
Yes,
and of course they wouldn't, would they? You know.
No, but I'm sure I used some sort of really cheap pen when I first started drawing Rogue Trooper. Well, because as you know, Mick, and I think we're all the same. Perhaps Brian isn't quite the same as this, but I was always looking for the perfect pen or the perfect ink or you know, and if you could find out what some famous cartoonists use, you think, great, that's the one to use. There was that book I had when we used to be in the studio, Mick, called Cartooning Tips and Tricks or something. And I remember going out and buying all the pen nibs that the cartoonists in there used in the hope that it would enable me to draw as well as them. And actually, just while I'm talking, indeed, as we used to say in the studio, I am talking already, so I may as well just carry on, you know. But I listened to the interview that you did, Mike, with Mike Dory, which was a real blast from the past for me because I hadn't seen him or heard him speak for years, and we used to know each other a bit back in the early days. And he used to use a J cloth to do his textural backgrounds. And I remember going into Woolworths in St Albans and buying a dishcloth and using that to do the background of Rogue Trooper because Mike Dory told me that was the way to get that effect. So that was the thing with Rogue Trooper, you know, with a cheap fountain pen.
There we go. For people looking on, watching this on YouTube, Brian's showing
I should have put this
pretty much the same thing on his book.
That was a dishcloth of some sort.
Oh yeah, is it a real one or a digital one?
No, that was originally a real one, but it's a Titan. No, not Titan. It's a poster. It's an IPC magazine's poster from 1980.
Wow, that's good.
Titan doing Brian Bolland tea club.
What?
a Titan now doing Brian Bolland dishcloths.
Oh yeah.
You could probably sell those, Brian. You could probably sell those, or as a digital brush, you know, the Brian Bolland dishcloth collection.
All right, okay.
And we used to call it bumping. I remember using that phrase in the studio, mate. I'm just going to bump the background in this.
By the sound of it, we could do an entire range of dishcloth brushes. You know, the Dave Gibbons dishcloth, the Brian Bolland one, and the Mike Dory one as well.
You could, yeah.
What did you have on your head just there, Dave? What did you have on your head?
It was my Rogue Trooper helmet. Look, I'm an honorary genetic infantry man.
Oh, there you go.
Look at
that. Well, you know, I've got a collection of hats. I think we ought to change.
I was mentioning that earlier. Have you got anything you're particularly fond of at the moment?
I think you tried a few on, didn't you? I think you've had I'll get one.
Me and the wife, we came to a hat party around your house. Yes, we did.
This is the kind of content our audience are definitely after, trying on hats.
This is behind people. Earthless, behind the scenes.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know what that one is.
That's stupid. That's the one.
It's a bit small for me, though. That one. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, let's get back to business.
No. I just I want to come back to when Mick wrote that amazing letter, because it's always wonderful to hear stories about the connections between people and how people get introduced to other people, and then all of a sudden everybody knows each other. Mick, was it odd for you because you were quite a bit younger than everybody else? This was your first kind of time as a professional. Was it kind of were you scared, trepidatious about kind of stepping into this professional world, or was it people like Dave that kind of helped make things quite smooth and relatively easy?
Well, no, because I mean, you'd still only see each other very occasionally. So but I wasn't that nervous. Although I'd had no idea who these people were in the office, and because we're never introduced by my agent, because I had an agent then. And I mean, for about 6 months, I thought Kelvin Gosnell was the editor, to be honest. So, because he was wearing smart clothes and wasn't standing on the desk the way the other fella was.
Yeah. Well,
I did make I did think at one point I'd ruined my career when I got drunk at the Christmas party. I thought, oh, that's it, I'm finished now. I've completely made it. I had a fool of myself. So I was laid out on Jack Legrand's desk. Because I remember I was talking to I can't think of his name now. It's really great. Brian Lewis. Brian Lewis was at this party. Remember Brian?
Oh
Lewis?
yes.
Yeah.
And
he was good.
talking to him, and I was so nervous talking to him because he's an idol of mine. And I was drinking vodka, and I just fell down drunk. So I thought, but I've obviously in that sort of business, this sort of thing is legendary, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think behaviour like that is why you fitted right in, Mickey. You know, that's
exactly. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, the next day I was absolutely mortified. Of course, I thought, oh no, I'll never hear from those people again. So, and I remember there was a woman. I don't know who she was. She was like Spanish in a wheelchair there as well. I've never known who she was. Does anyone know anything about that? No. It's not in the vaults or anything, is it? So.
No.
Well, I mean, is there a Spanish woman in a wheelchair in the vaults? No, I've not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing about Mick was, and why it was interesting to see his work, that my background was being a fan of American comics, which I think is true for Brian as well. Yeah. And so I was in that kind of American comics fandom. Whereas Mick actually came more from the European end. I mean, I think it's fair to say, Mick, that your big influences were European artists like Gino D'Antonio and Hugo Pratt and people like that.
That's right, yeah. Because at the time, actually, when I was starting to get work, when I started doing Dredd and that, they'd just started publishing sort of Warren magazines in England with a proper British cover price and things. And that was full of sort of Jose Ortiz and people like that, And I remember what got me the job was Paul Neri was doing a lot of work for them, and I was really taken with his stuff. And I just penciled some story I wrote, and I got a call from the agent who said, "Have you got anything new to show?" So I brought that up there, and that's what they took to 2000 AD. And I never bothered inking it, but it was just because those magazines had come out, really.
You've been doing stuff for DC Thompson, haven't you, Mick? Sort of experimental stuff.
Well, they were going to do a science fiction comic, weren't they? Because that's how they used to do things, wasn't it? They'd hear like action. Didn't DC Thompson bring out Rival to that as well when that came out?
Well, they brought out Warlord was a response to Battle, I think it was.
Yeah. I think there was one that brought out.
It was called
Bullet as well. Though.
It was called Bullet.
Was it?
Yeah,
right.
I think so.
Well, anyway, they were going to do. They'd heard that they would do in 2000 AD, and so they were going to do a science fiction comic as well. So I actually wrote and drew some things for this putative comic. But the editor, he was one of their oldest editors, I think. I can't remember what his name was, but he died, and so that put an end to that. So that's why that never came out. So, but I did do. I mean, it wouldn't have been much of a rival, I don't think. I did a story about people stuck in a high-rise building. I just read high-rise, and they were going around trying to. There's some nonsense about getting videotapes or something to keep themselves amused while they were starving to death. But they said, oh yeah, it's really good, but let's call it the Tellymen. Do you remember, like, based on the Jellymen out of Beezer?
Oh yeah.
So I had to do a splash page of people with televisions in the middle of their head. You know, so it wasn't very interesting. So.
What might have been?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, it was. But there was another guy whose work I really liked at the time. I can't remember, but he used to do a lot of stuff set in like Victorian London. So I actually did something that was set in Victorian London as well. So, and that was dreadful as well. But that was me writing it though. I mean, the art wasn't too bad. But...
So, have you ever felt like writing something later on in your career?
No, because what happened? It was because I worked with Mills and Wagner, wasn't it? So. Their stuff was so good that if it wasn't as good as that, obviously I did try a few things, but I just got depressed too quick. So after about, I don't know, 20 minutes usually.
That's quick.
Yeah. No, I don't think I really had it in me to write. I mean, you've written a few things, haven't you, Brian?
Me?
Did you write The Actress and the Bishop?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, was that Gary Leach and Dave Elliott in A1?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they said I could do anything I liked, and I can't write commercial stuff at all. I couldn't possibly write a sort of hit, self-owned thing.
I can write stuff that has no ending.
Yeah,
corporately, that's perfect.
No, it's like I think. An artist likes to think that they can sort of tell a little bit of a story through the pictures. But if there are some sort of resolution, it's not going to happen.
The thing about when you're an artist and you're working with a writer, writers never give you the stuff to draw that you want to draw. And I always think that, if you want to draw something in particular, the only way you're going to get to do it is if you write this. I did one Batman story, which I was quite pleased with, and it just enabled me to draw the Batcave, Gotham's skyline, and the Penguin, and all the things I wanted to draw were in that story because I'd written it. It wasn't particularly good, but there is this thing. Go on.
So I was going to say, I wrote a Batman story, didn't I, Dave? And you knocked it into shape.
Well, no,
Batman black and white.
Yeah, called Fat City.
That's right, yeah.
Which was great. I thought it was a great story. I mean, it was your story and your pictures, and I kind of wrote the kind of dialogue and the structure of the whole thing. But no, that was really good. I mean, the thing that I find, I have written a few things, but what I like is the collaboration. I don't like writing for myself because then you sort of lose perspective. And you're sort of too much in your own little personal world. I've enjoyed writing for other people, and I've been lucky enough to have good people to draw the scripts, and in many cases, much better than I could have drawn them.
Dave, I always like that story you tell about how a new comic artist comes along, and on day one, in the script it says panel. You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
No.
In panel one, it says man gets out of taxi on busy London street, and at that point you really want to give up because how the hell do you do that kind of thing on the first panel?
Yeah. Well, that actually that's based on the very first script that I ever got from Fleetway, because I managed to get a gig filling in for Joe Calhoun, the legendary artist, while he was on holiday, and he used to draw a thing in the Buster called Saga, Man of Mystery, which was sort of in the British tradition of the bad guy being the hero of the strip, just like the Spider and Janus Stark and all that kind of stuff. And literally that script, it was page one, panel one, and it was Inspector Gumball, reference attached, gets out of a London taxi cab outside New Scotland Yard. So, two problems. What does a London taxi cab look like? And what does New Scotland Yard look like? So I actually went up our local taxi rank and took pictures of taxis. Yeah. And then I phoned up the police. I actually phoned up the publicity director or whatever they were called. of the Metropolitan Police. And I said, oh, hello, I'm a commercial artist and I've got this rush job on and I have to draw New Scotland Yard. Have you any pictures of it? This is obviously pre-Google. And well, it's pre most things actually, but we did have the telephone. And I said, because I've got to draw New Scotland Yard. And they very kindly sent me 3 or 4 lovely glossy photos of New Scotland Yard with the sign outside. So that is actually based on what happens.
It's on a true story.
Yeah, and it's at that point that you realise that just drawing alien space fleets or superheroes is only going to get you so far, you know. But anyway.
Yeah.
It was something that came up in our chat, I think, Brian, about the desire to get things right, the desire to base things on something that's relatively real, something that you can see and research and think about. With doing sci-fi, with doing things like Judge Dredd, is there a risk of, I don't know, your skills of how to draw things?
Oh, it's much easier to draw sci-fi than it is to draw a London street.
Yeah,
I can assure you. But you can get away with all kinds of things. I mean, those buildings in Judge Dredd, I mean, I don't know whether Carlos invented them or you did, Mick, or what, but we now know what they look like. We don't have to go out and look to see what New York looks like. It's much easier to do science fiction, isn't it? Because you can make it all up.
I think, yeah. But I think that's part of the reason why I wouldn't want to write my own stuff, really, that I might draw. That is, because if you just write what you want to draw, you end up going down a hole, really, because you're not going to be stretched at all, are you? You'd be perfecting one thing, really. Well, I would.
No, I don't know. I mean, I've only recently drawn one Judge Dredd page, and that must have been years ago now. It was for was it number 1000 or something?
It was Prog 2000.
I remember the last panel, and it was a small panel, and in the small panel, I had to have Judge Dredd arresting one member of a gang while Tharg looks on, standing in front of the door he's just walked through. In the background, there's a crowd watching, and there's Mega City in the background. Meanwhile, I'm not done. Meanwhile, in the sky, there's a collage of all of Judge Dredd's main villains. Now, this was in the small final panel. And I sort of think, what planet are some of these people on? That they think you can fit all that in. I mean, I like a nice big close-up every once in a while, so you don't have to draw crowds in every panel. That's why I don't draw many comics.
I think one of the nice things about science fiction is as well that, you know, or if you've got a really good character like Judge Dredd or Batman, let's say, it will withstand all sorts of artistic interpretation and you'll still accept that it's Batman. Whereas the days that I'm talking of, there was a house style and it was a realistic house style and it had to look convincing. You know, one of the nice things about science fiction is that it's within its own terms, it has to look convincing, but you're not necessarily tied by exactly what things in the real world look like, you know? Yeah. So that's quite a happy area to be in, I've always thought.
Well, what I found was that although you can obviously do anything you want, more or less, I found myself, whenever I had to draw something new, it had to fit with what had already gone before, which sometimes made things really difficult because there'd be things like a toaster or something. You think, well, I mean, obviously toasters is all going to look like toasters, I suppose, but it became it's another problem that you wouldn't have with drawing something in the real world, is it? Because you know what everything looks like already, so you don't have to create these things.
I remember talking to an artist who did a short run on Spider-Man. Of course, that's set in New York, and he busted his deadline because he became obsessed with getting New York right, and virtually every panel became like a 3-perspective background. And he was doing it on a computer. He could sort of do that every single time, and he said it drove him absolutely insane trying to get make it look real. You know.
Yeah, I've heard that Marvel have got a 3D program somewhere, which is New York as a 3D program that any artist for Marvel can use, and they can sort of enter it onto their screen or whatever, and there's New York for them, and they can move it around in perspective. Do you think that's true?
Yes, I do. It's using a program called SketchUp, which is quite an easy to learn, but it's an architectural modelling thing. Yep. But the problem is it becomes this school of art where whenever you draw a background, you draw every single window in every single building.
I do that anyway, Dave.
Sorry?
I do that anyway, Dave.
Yeah, which is one way of drawing, but I don't think, I'm always struck by, I was talking about some of Mick's favourite artists, the sort of Italian and Spanish schools, and I was looking at some of the war stuff, and they never really get into drawing a great amount of detail. The atmosphere is completely right, but lots of things are silhouettes or just little vignetted areas in the background. And to my way of thinking, that kind of is more effective. I sometimes look at this modern superhero stuff and just think, God, you could have done that in a third of the time and it would have probably been 3 times as exciting,
Yeah.
But I don't know. If that's what the requirements are, and perhaps it's an editorial requirement that we want fully rendered backgrounds, but I think it's a bit of a blind alley, with New Scotland Yard, probably I drew New Scotland Yard in a taxi and a bit of a skyline, and that was it,
I always want to say to Chris Weston, who I think is a terrific artist, Chris, every now and again, leave out the background. Do you know his work? He draws every background, every panel has a fully rendered background in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to hit on Chris because I know Chris and he's a great.
Oh, he's great.
And he's a brilliant art. He's an absolutely brilliant artist.
He can turn it out.
I've seen some of his sketches, his thumbnail sketches, and they are finished artwork. He could submit those, and they are finished artwork. I don't know. There must be something to do with you adding value by spending more time on it, and I don't necessarily think that's a valid equation.
Well, there's him and Dylan Teague, who would do his sort of thumbnail pencils at about A5, and he'd post them up online, and you look at them and you go, "Oh, that must be the finished pencil." And you go, "No, that's the thumbnail."
Yeah.
You've got to do that twice more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although I'd still say that to have a good thumbnail drawing is a really wise thing to do. I used to be really struck by the thumbnails that Mick would do. They weren't fully noodled up drawings, but they were really good compositions, and you would always do them in ink, wouldn't you, Mick? It'd always be an ink outline and all the solid black put in. And I thought they of themselves were quite lovely pieces of artwork, but there was no sense in which they were just redrawn again. They were still just the basis for the final drawing, weren't they, Mick?
Yeah, they're very rough, weren't they? But they were more about composition and page layout and stuff like that, really. Now, then the real struggle started after that, didn't it? Where got to turn it into proper drawings. So.
Yeah.
If I put any more work into those thumbnails, it would have taken me 10 times longer, because then the final art would have to be even better than that, more detailed. So. Yeah. Because I always feel like if I've done really detailed preliminary work, then I always think that the final thing's got to be even more detailed than that. So, right. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense, but it's just what goes on in my head.
Yeah. So how about you, Brian? Do you do like finished thumbnails or?
Well, you introduced me to the Autograph projector, didn't you?
I did.
In fact, every major step in my artistic technique.
And that slowed you down for a few years, didn't it?
It did. And I think I told Michael the story of the Autograph projector, and God, that was a pain. For one thing, it wouldn't quite project accurately. The top was always a bit bigger than the bottom, so people ended up with bigger heads than their feet. So I had to sort of anyway. Did you ever use one of those?
No, but I'm still recovering from hitting my head on Dave's. I was trying to. I think it was the day I was making you a parcel on the same table, and I went to turn around and say something, bash my head on it. So.
Probably it was, but you didn't damage the autograph, Mickey, so I wasn't really worried.
So, Mick, how did you go from A5 thumbnails to the artwork-sized artwork? did you not project it somehow?
No, I just
Sort of
just
did it by eye.
It was just
drew
yeah,
it?
it was just because I mean, because I used to do things like I would actually. Well, you've seen me, David. I'd draw a beautiful head, or as well as I could draw it, and think, oh bugger, it's like 2 inches too far to the whatever, and have to redraw it. So. I mean, it's easy scaling up the panels because you can do that with maths, can't you? But the bits inside, I used to measure it up though. I used to sort of go, that's 2 millimeters times 3.85 or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
I used to do a dance with a pair of dividers because I'd have the thumbnails a certain proportion of the size of the finished thing, maybe a quarter of it. So then I get my dividers and then I do it 4 times on the finished thing so that I could, which is just really being scared of actually committing to drawing it, because really you could eyeball it as well as anything. But I must say the Artograph projector, I did shed a little tear when I threw mine on the dump because it was quite useful for that stage of it. And it was really useful when I was doing Doctor Who and I had to do a lot of likenesses because the way I do it was every couple of pages, I reckon you used to have a really good on-model picture of Tom Baker. And I had a fair old stack of them. So I penciled the whole thing out and I just kind of do a football for where I wanted Tom Baker's head to be. Then I'd find the photo that fitted the expression and I'd autograph that and I'd get the likeness, if I say so myself, spot on, But it was interesting because Mick drew a couple of episodes of Doctor Who when I was on holiday. And I much preferred what Mick did because you actually kind of cartooned it. You actually drew your version of Tom Baker rather than being, stuck on a photographic likeness. And I really wish I'd done that.
Oh, I used to love your Doctor Who. It was really very good. Because who was writing it? It was Steve Parkhouse, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Pat and John to begin with, but by the time I think we were in the studio, it was Steve Moore and Steve Parkhouse, I think.
That's right, yes. I
thought Steve Parkhouse was an artist. I didn't know he...
Steve Parkhouse is one of the greatest unsung talents in comics.
Bo Jeffries saga, that's the greatest drawing ever.
It's fantastic, isn't it, the Bo Jeffries saga? It's one of the very best. I don't know whether Alan Moore did anything else after that, did he?
Alan Moore...
It was great. I love the opening line, "Call me Inchmail." He spends his whole time trying to think of a title for his autobiography.
Yeah.
He's just the postman. I'm being rude about postman.
I broke into comics by doing balloon lettering, and I actually learned how to do it from Steve Parkhouse. He let me look over his shoulder and he explained to me how to do it. And it was his method that I adopted. But he's a very retiring
I've never met him. Never met the guy.
Although I do believe there's a series that he's been doing with Peter Hogan for Dark Horse called, I think it's Resident Alien. And my understanding is that that's been picked up by a movie studio. So it may be at the end of the day that he does... get some decent money, probably be in a movie studio, you won't, but anyway. He's a fantastic talent, and he used to write and letter some of my Doctor Who, so it was a really weird thing. He ended up doing what he taught me to do because I was too busy to do it, but anyway. Yeah.
Did I hear that Comic Sans is a bit of a pinch of your... Am I getting us all into trouble by saying this?
No, I've actually had a Twitter correspondence with a guy called Vincent Canaire, who's the guy who designed Comic Sans. And in a nutshell, the story is that he was working for Microsoft and they wanted like a comic book font. They wanted an informal hand-done font. And there was a really quick deadline. And on his shelf in his studio, he had Dark Knight Returns, which the Frank Miller book, that was lettered by John Costanza. And he had Watchmen, which was famously lettered by me. And what he did was copy letter forms from those. But it's a mishmash, and he would admit it's a mishmash. And it's...
Because your S has got that little vertical line at the top, hasn't it? It's not your trademark.
S. Yeah, that's part of the way that I would draw it. But yes, so he did it as a real last minute task, and he would say himself that it isn't very good, and all the things are wrong with it. You know, the kerning isn't right, and it's just
Really?
it's ugly. Whereas in fact, I mean, to be completely fair about it, John Costanza was one of the people that I based my lettering style on. So really, it would be fairer to say it was based on John Costanza's. We were both based on John Costanza's font. But I've got my own hand lettering font now, which I had made professionally. So all the kerning and everything like that looks good.
Richard Starkins did one for me as well. You know, it's a sort of Mr. Mamoulian.
Yeah, and it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I never use it.
Mick's a very good letterer. Mick is a very good letterer. Although I think the other, I'm sorry to go on and on and on, but the other technical innovation, which was almost a downfall there, was I bought an electric eraser, which is great because if you made a mistake inking something, it's got a very abrasive tip, and you can just completely remove the ink, and then
it looks like a Black and Decker drill, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And then you're left with the surface.
The eraser's going around really fast. You know, it's like
and then you're left with a surface that you can redraw over because it's all sort of sanded smooth. So
Michael, I told you that when we artists get together, we just talk about erasers and pencil tips and stuff like that.
That is one of the many reasons why I wanted to get you all together, so that you could indulge.
Incidentally, is there anything you wanted to know? Were there any questions you wanted to ask us?
Brian.
No, keep talking.
I haven't finished. Brian, please.
Sorry. Go on.
My electric eraser anecdote.
Come on then.
Please.
Stop him, Brian. Don't stop him.
The best is yet to come.
Come on then.
No, but the thing is with Mick, I persuaded him, or he persuaded himself to actually letter this backup thing for Doctor Who he was doing. But because he's such a perfectionist, if one little stroke of the letters was wrong, out came the electric eraser. And I think it's true to say, Mick, you actually went through the paper, didn't you?
I did not. Not paper. It was 2-ply shot hammer Bristol board, wasn't it? Which was really thick. You know, I mean, you could wedge up, block up fireplaces with it. But it's I went right to the whole thing.
I was doing a bit of lettering.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there wasn't that for the. There was another backup stories, wasn't it? About the the riverboat thing, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Which bizarrely, I mean, the thing I hate. I mean, I love Western films, but anything set on riverboats, I absolutely hate. I can't stand it. And there's me drawing one.
What, to draw or to watch on telly?
No, anything to do with them. You know,
anything to do with riverboats.
Yeah, we have paddle wheels going round. You know, it's like I hate them.
Riverboat phobia.
Stupid double funnels and things.
I've been on a couple on the Mississippi.
And it had a character in it. It was Michael Gough, wasn't it? Wasn't he the villain?
That's right. Yeah. Was he something clockmaker or something?
Something like that.
I don't know. Yeah. It was. It was
he
him.
Was Alfred,
anyway.
Wasn't he?
He was what?
He was Alfred, wasn't he? Michael Gough.
He was at one point, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was Alfred in the Michael Keaton movies.
He was. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I've been on a couple of river boats in my time on the Mississippi.
Really?
Well, I went to where the Battle of New Orleans took place in New Orleans. But
I've never been down that way. I've never been.
That's great.
Yeah,
I love it down there. Yep.
Just to interject, one thing I would like you to talk about, if you can, is these days in the studio with Mick and Dave, because just off the stories that you've both told me about it sounds like you did more messing around than artwork some days.
Oh no, we worked all the time. We never messed around. No, we got loads of stuff done in there. Didn't we?
It was surprising because sitting there drawing was like unmemorable because that's what you do. But all I can remember are all the stupid things about whose turn to make the coffee or who'd had the last hobnob. Or I remember there was one day, and I was very mischievous. Mick had some sort of deadline on, and I had my new sort of artist trolley. You know, the thing you put your pens in, your ink and everything.
Oh, the Bobby trolley. Yeah.
The Bobby trolley. And I dedicated the day to distracting Mick by showing him all the drawers and all the things you could do and how I had all my pens lined up. So there would be the odd bit of mischief like that. But also, it was really quite primitive, wasn't it, Mick? It was actually not so much a studio. It was like a sort of lean-to greenhouse, really.
Well, it was around the back of that antique shop, wasn't it? It was like one of the workshop rooms. Because the first day we worked there together, they went home out of the shop and locked us in.
Yeah,
and we had to climb over the walls.
Yeah.
Because it was like a walled garden, and we had to climb over. It's right by St Albans Abbey, actually. So
yeah, and I remember actually really freaking myself out one night because it was very dark and it was all old fashioned and everything, and I had left something behind, so I let myself through the antique shop and came out into the darkened yard, walked down across the path to where we were, and there in the air in front of me, bobbing up and down, was a skull. A glowing skull. And I had that moment of, if you've ever seen anything like that, you sort of think, oh my God. And what it was actually a plastic kit model of a skull that I had on a shelf. And I didn't realise until it was dark that it actually glowed in the dark. And it wasn't moving, but I was moving. But of course I just read it as, oh my God, it's some sort of haunting from, some plague pit behind the abbey or something like that, So that's one thing I remember about it. And it also used to leak, so you had to be really careful about leaving artwork. But
it didn't leak. It was because it had a perspex corrugated roof, didn't it? And it used to get condensation on it.
Oh, was it that?
So we used to leave the heater on all night. And Miss Peyton, the older woman who was in charge of the shop, and who had a shed full of blokes making antiques out the back. She said, gosh, my electricity bill's very high. I've got no idea. But what I remember what happened one day was that she was there on her own and someone wanted to look at a wagon wheel she had hanging up. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
It was Patsy Rowland out of the Carry On films.
It was.
And you went out, took the wheel down, rolled it along, said, look, it still works. And Patsy Rowland didn't crack nothing,
no, she didn't.
Face.
I think probably, and we've established that I probably in my lifetime said a lot. I think that's one of the funniest things I ever said. But it still works. I think that's comedy genius. I don't care if I'm immodest. I've got to tell you, that is funny. But anyway, she didn't smile and she didn't buy it either.
Didn't crack a smile.
No.
I suppose she's thinking I'm the one who does the jokes.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Mind you, those antique manufacturing blokes, I mean, what they would basically do, they get quite reasonable furniture and smack it around with chains and things just to make it look old and distressed. But I remember we told them that we wanted a plan chest to put our artwork in. And they got us this fantastic bloody Victorian brass handled plan chest. And I think they charged us 10 bob or something for it, 50p. No, you can have it. It was a house clearance, so they were a good bunch of blokes to know.
Yeah, nice.
But I think we really both enjoyed working in the studio together, and it was a shame to break it up. And I'm surprised, as Mick says, actually how much work I got done, because I was doing Doctor Who and I co-created Rogue Trooper there, and Mick did all the Block Wars stuff and the Fink Angel, and you were working on that full colour Dredd annual you did.
I don't remember ever seeing you two work together, either one of you penciling and one of you inking. Or did you ever collaborate on a piece of artwork?
Yeah, wasn't there an Angel Gang pin-up?
Really?
Yeah, it was just one. It was like a posed shot of the Angel Gang.
But it was the usual pose, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was done in sepia, so it looked like a sort of an old Wild West.
Oh, right.
Thing. But no, Mick penciled that, and I inked it.
Okay.
Which was it was an interesting thing, but I think it's funny when you ink somebody else, you always lose a little bit of the quality of it, and sometimes if the pencils, I've inked other people's work, and if the pencils are a bit rough, I just let myself go on the basis that I can't probably make it much worse. But I do remember, because Mick's pencils were so beautifully precise and delicate, that I felt that sort of heavy-handed it a bit, but anyway.
Well, I do as well, because I think that, because I don't do, well, I try not to do penciling like that, but I mean, I can't help myself. But if the penciling is really delicate and, you know, sort of almost like finished, then any inking spoils it, I think. So, that's been, I've had that feeling all through my career, really. Like I'm ruining everything I put.
No, I think that's a bit misplaced, actually, Mick. I know exactly what you mean, but the thing that I've always found is a successful way to work is like
touching your face.
It's a sort of a breathing in and out thing. You do like a rough that's quite rough, and then you do a tightish pencil drawing, and then what I've always tried to do with my inks is to sort of loosen it up again, you know. And the thing that I used to like about the way you inked was you draw very delicately, but your inking had a beautifully definite and precise final line to it. You know, it was quite, it didn't look feathery or over delicate. It looked really robust.
No, because that was always because I'd spent so long doing the pencils, I didn't have time to do the inks. They were done really fast. But that's my downfall, I think, was when people did say, well, take as long as you like. You know, and then I think, oh, I can ink it properly now. So that's, you know, the end times.
I remember you seem to have an aversion to solid black areas, Mick. I remember when you were doing Slain, all those black areas, you could see each stroke of your pen or whatever you were using.
Yeah, I can't remember what pens I used then. It was like Dave said earlier, you know, I thought, oh, this is the one that's going to see me through. But
were you working on tracing paper or something like? Did you?
I did for a while, yeah, I did, because I was just nervous. So I thought, well, I'll ink it roughly and then ink it properly on tracing paper. And there was a place down near St Albans Abbey that used to do dry mounting, if anyone knows what that used to be.
Yeah, I remember.
And I used to get it mounted on Bristol board. Oh. But what happened though is because I was putting in the blacks on tracing paper, I didn't realise I hadn't filled it in properly. So when it was dry mounted, there was all these gaps in the blacks. So I thought it looked quite good, so I carried on doing it.
It
looked great.
But it's strange because in a pre-digital age, what I think you were falling into there, Mick, was what can sometimes be the curse of the digital artist. You can always undo. It's like, I'll draw that line, it's not right. I'll draw it again, it's not right. I'll draw it again, Does that happen to you, Brian? Do you find yourself redrawing lines, or do you normally go with your first attempt?
Oh, yeah. On Photoshop, I can redraw any blooming thing, you know. But I'm frequently drawing with the pen tool now. I'm using a lot of the lines I draw. I use the pen and Bezier curves, so I can plot. Like if I'm drawing a leg or something that requires a smooth shape, I sort of do that with the Bezier curve, and then I move the handles around a little bit, and then if you press enter, you know how that works, don't you? You get your line. Yeah. And if it's not quite right, you can go Apple Z, and it goes away, and then you can move it a little bit. And then once you've drawn your line, you move your handle a little bit so that it gets a little bit thicker in one place. You know, half the time I'm doing it that way.
Yeah.
I drew a thing for, I can't remember, is it? Self-Made Hero, is that it? Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
It was, I can't think of his name now. He used to write horror stuff. Lovecraft, that's it. They did a Lovecraft anthology, and I was doing the picture in the house. And I thought, well, what I'm going to try is I'm going to ink this in Manga Studio, right? Mm-hmm. So, of course, the first page has got a bloke on a bike, isn't it? So I'm trying to ink this bike wheel, and that must have taken me 3 days to ink that with all the undoing, and the whole thing took me about 4 weeks to ink it, because I kept undoing every single line multiple times.
So you know how to use Manga Studio, Mick, do you? Because I've got
it. I did then, yeah. I tend to, if I went to use it now, I can remember how to set a page up and how to do the lettering, but I couldn't. There's other things that have gone, but it could all come back. So.
Yeah, I
like the lettering though.
Yeah, I've used Manga Studio a bit. In fact, the page that I did for Prog 2000 or whatever it was, that was all done in Manga Studio. And indeed, if you only knew Mick, deep in the bowels of Manga Studio, there are some perfect ellipse rulers and things like that you can adjust. But that's the problem with digital drawing. It takes you so long to get in the position where you can draw fluently anyway. You know, that's the real bugbear. I was just going to say one other thing on the subject of artistic insecurity, and this is really weird, because when I worked in the studio with Mick, I was in awe of Mick's precision when he drew, and the lovely, clean and precise lines that he used, to the degree that by the time he'd inked over his pencil drawings, he didn't have to erase the pencils, because they were so lightly done that they would really disappear with his hand moving. And I've always been a bit more of a kind of gung-ho, ababashed kind of artist. And I thought, you know, I wish I was as good an artist as Mick, because I draw much too quickly, and I really should take more time, and I should really be more precise about it. And I got a bit of a thing about it.
That's your page, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that was all done in Manga Studio.
It is, but years later, I said that to Mick. Oh, you know, I used to be in awe of the way you did it. And Mick said to me, "Well, how do you think I felt? I was slaving away, and look at you churning out all that good stuff week after week." So I envied Mick's ability to draw, and he envied my ability to draw quickly. You know, which is ridiculous. But I think we're an insecure bunch, us artists. Anyway, would you agree, Brian?
I think we are. Yeah. I mean, I was horrified when I saw how quickly you could turn out those Power Man pages when we first started.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing the easy bit of it. I mean, I was kind of drawing backgrounds where there isn't so much on it. But I do remember when we did that, because I had to help Brian out on an issue of Power Man, and I never worked through the night, but I did work through the night. So
did you?
So we could get
Thank
that
you.
done. And I remember being in one room in Brian's flat, and it was a thing with fire engines in it. So it was all straight lines, fire engines and ladders and things.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I did give it all a look over, and my primary inking tool was the pencil eraser. So I just got rid of anything that I didn't think was absolutely necessary. So I was drawing away like this, and I had to let some ink dry. I thought I'd just go and see how Brian's doing. And I went in the next room, and Brian's got his number 2 watercolour brush, and he's moving about that fast.
Yes.
No, and also, and I thought, God, that's what proper artists do, not acts like me, you know. So there you go. It's the same story, really, isn't it? God, I wish I could draw as quick as Dave, and Dave, and I wish I could draw as well as him. So there we are.
When you're in the studio, do you think you kind of rubbed off on each other a little bit? You know, were there elements of what you were seeing in the other person's artwork that kind of maybe crept into yours a little bit, or was it just kind of admiration across the room?
Well, I certainly liked, because Mick came from a completely different angle to me. So there were things in Mick's work that I found really attractive that I kind of tried to nick, I suppose. Something about being
I did, for sure.
Being more aware of kind of abstract shapes or something, and more aware of composition rather than just bashing it out, you know? I think so.
Well, I think we did discuss lots of sort of ways of trying to make it easier, didn't we? Blacks in first and things like that. Yeah. And we were both doing that. I mean, it's I started using the dip pen because you were, so
right.
Which I'd never dreamt of using before. So
no, because you used to
after trying to use a fountain pen anyway. So.
Yeah, but then you used to do this rigmarole where you'd buy markers and you drip Indian ink in them and push them.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then
they were fibre tips, weren't they? You couldn't get permanent fibre tips then, so because everything had to be permanent then. You know? Whereas nowadays you don't have to worry about things like that.
No.
Because I mean, I remember. Is it Pete Knight was a letterer, and he was lettering when I was drawing the Yeah, I think it was Robusters. But he took some pages home to letter, and he got chip fat on them somehow. I think he was lettering them in the kitchen, which made it quite difficult to ink. You can't really ink on chip fat. But the whole thing then with the with the original art was it had to be as permanent as possible, didn't it? You couldn't get away with sort of.
Mick, are people buying your artwork these days?
Well, there isn't any, so it's all been bought. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there wasn't much to be getting on with, really, was there? So,
but you're still working on paper, though, aren't you?
I am, yes, yeah. Well, it depends what I'm doing. I mean, I do work on paper all the time. I always colour in Photoshop. No, I don't use paint or anything. But no, I always work on paper now. I don't, like I said, that thing with the Lovecraft story. That determined. I think I'm not doing that again. So.
Okay.
Because Brian, didn't you say that we were talking about how you don't like you don't sketch at conventions because the more you've used the computer, the less you've been able to retain the skills of.
That's right. Yeah, I always used to use a brush. There's no way I could use a brush anymore. I wouldn't be. I mean, I'm so used to the pressure of the Wacom pen on the tablets that I couldn't use a brush anymore. And drawing with fiber tips or whatever they are at a convention, it's not a proper drawing, and you end up with that on the internet somewhere. And I'd like the stuff that goes out there to be up to a standard that I would like to present, really. So I don't like to do it.
I've just got two heads I draw at conventions. There's one Dredd.
Yeah, I did
front
that.
foot, and that's all anyone gets. And then they sort of compare them at the end of the day. So you've got the best one. It's like this.
Yeah.
Well,
I just used to do the Joker head over and over again.
Well,
otherwise
the thing that I draw at conventions is Rorschach, which is basically if you draw a hat. You just got to draw a hat, and then that's it, really, because the rest of it's a blob and a few lines for a collar. But I don't like drawing in public, and I think probably, well, I don't draw quite as well as I used to.
No.
But I would also say that, and this is my excuse, that the materials are not as good as they used to be. Watercolour brushes are not anything like as good as they used to be. Pen nibs nowadays tend to be made of an alloy that isn't as resilient as the ones. So before I started to do stuff digitally, I went over to using like fibre pens. But you don't, for the way I draw, you don't get the same quality of line, and you have to throw them away every 5 minutes because you've only got to press down heavily once, and they're spoiled, So, but I any drawing I do for publication nowadays, which isn't much, I would do digitally because it's kind of.
I'm in a bit of a dilemma these days because at conventions we just do signatures. And the trend is towards charging for every signature you do, something like £3 a signature. And I think Neil Adams charges quite a lot.
$40?
$40 a signature.
That's what I heard. I'm not saying that's so, but that's what I heard.
Yeah, I remember Stan Lee was doing that, wasn't he, for a long time? But it makes me sort of not know whether I should go to conventions anymore, because for a while we were doing 3 signatures for free. And then after that, if you wanted more done, people had to pay £3 each for them. So they were coming along to get their 3 signatures and then going to the back of the queue again and coming back for 3 more.
Yeah.
And Mike Zack said to me, no, charge for everything. And it's really stopped me going to conventions altogether because I don't know whether it's fair or not.
Well, there are people who scam artists by getting lots of stuff signed because they can then get it slabbed and they can make money off doing it. But I basically, to me, appearing at a convention is an exercise in public relations more than a money-making opportunity. And that's the other reason I don't like to do much drawing, because if you're really drawing something, as we all know, you're not in the room anymore. You're off in your head somewhere, and you're sitting on an uncomfortable chair, and you can't draw it as well as you'd like to anyway. So I would much rather do a thing that is clearly a sketch, which is sort of 10 lines or something.
What about just signatures?
Yeah, I'd be uncomfortable charging for a signature, I think. But then again, if people are making money from it, then you're a mug if you don't, really. But
occasionally people come along with a whole pile and they say, look, I've got 40 comics here, and they're all in polythene bags and they've all got a little square cut out.
Yeah, well, those are the scammers. Those are the people who are there on behalf of a company or a comic shop who are having mass, and they're being paid to stand in the line, and then
but they usually tell me, I've got 40 comics to sign, I'll give you so much money for it. So they do pay me for that, and so I know, but I guess they make a bit more out of selling them somewhere.
And I guess it's a free market, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just want to sort of talk a little bit more about the connections between people, because earlier this week I interviewed Colin Wilson.
Yeah, I saw some of that. Your interviews are very long. They're 2.25 hours for Colin. I didn't get halfway.
People have got a lot of time on their hands at the moment. So
and also, I listened to John McRae and the other guy from Belfast.
PJ Holden.
And you ask them a question, and their answer is like 15 minutes long. They tell you an entire life story about, the whole story of the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
Yeah. From an interviewing perspective, that's absolute gold.
It's gold, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So I interviewed Colin Wilson, and he talked about how he just knocked on your door, Brian, and kind of introduced himself and watched your work and things like that.
Yeah, we got to know each other very well, him and Janet. They spent a lot of time at our flat. And
he spent some time around our studio, didn't he, Mick? Didn't he come and help himself to something one day?
He did, yeah. He came and borrowed a book when we weren't there, didn't he?
He did. He did.
But all the way to St Albans.
Yeah. Because he was drawing Road Trooper at the time. But I used to get on very well with Colin. In fact, not too long ago, he was here when last time he was over in England.
Really?
And and he's a really interesting case, because he's a kid from New Zealand whose overriding influence was Jean Giraud. So his ambition was always to draw like Jean Giraud, and he somehow found his way to France, got to know Jean Giraud, and actually took over Blueberry, which is amazing. But no, he's a nice guy, and he's a really good draftsman as well. So
very, very good.
Yeah.
But it's this notion of just kind of introductions being made, new generations. Like I said, Mick was young when he started working in comics, and it's I'm really interested in how, I don't know, you form connections between people, you form friendships, you form working relationships that turn into friendships, and how you guys think that has helped over the years, so that when opportunities have come up like 2000 AD, you're able to just go, hey Barry, get me a job on that. How important you think that's been to the development of your careers? I guess I'll ask Mick first.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I suppose it's just networking, really, isn't it? In the end, it's you know more and more people, and you hear about things that are being done, and you say, "I wouldn't mind having a go at that." I mean, it's like I think when I did Slain, I mean, I just, someone mentioned it in the office when I was delivering something, and so I phoned Pat and said I'd like to draw it, and luckily he said yes. So, but I mean, otherwise, I might not have ever have done that. So it's just snippets of information that you can sort of use, I suppose. I think though that knowing people in the business is eventually it just transcends the work, and they're just just friends, really. It's and in some ways it becomes, I mean, for me, it becomes to ask people if they know about anything going on that I can do. It almost seems vulgar if they're friends, That's how it strikes me. That after a while it becomes more than business, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I would say with 2000 AD, it kind of came along at exactly the right time, because a lot of us by that time had grown up reading sort of American comics and loved comics as comics. And the fact that we were at the level of kind of professional development where we were professionals, or we could be professionals, and that there was a comic being published which encapsulated just the kind of thing that we wanted to draw. And the fact that a lot of us were based in or near London meant that we would, as we got to know each other, we maybe just bump into each other in the office, but then we make a definite effort to go into the office on the day when we knew one of our pals was going in. And then also, all three of us here, and also Kevin O'Neill and Robin Smith, who was the art editor, and Richard Burton and Nick Landau, we used to get together once a month or something and go for a boys' night out and have a...
We went for a boys' night out, didn't we? We had a pizza and a pint somewhere, didn't we?
Yeah. And there was another seminal thing that I was actually talking to somebody about the other day, which was the comic marts that they used to have at the Westminster Central Hall every month. And we'd all go along to that. Me and Mick had come up together from St Albans, where we used to live. And, you know, you'd arrive there, you'd take half an hour to walk around and see what comics were for sale. Then you go in the pub called the Westminster Arms that had the quality of, like, you know, when you see a really badly done historical drama where Charles Dickens bumps into William Thackeray and then, oh, look, it's Prince Albert and it's Florence Nightingale, you know, oh, Charles Darwin, you know. But in this pub on one Saturday every month, everybody would be in there, all the 2000 AD crew, all the Marvel UK crew, people who just did fanzines, people who did fanzines wanted to break into comics, people who just loved comics. And it was completely democratic, and everybody would have a drink and chat about what was going on. And
I don't think Mick was there, were you? You didn't.
He was.
No, he used to go to those, yeah. Yeah, me and Dave.
You never bought a bloody pint. That's why you...
No, it's because we used to get let in early and do what Dave called the celebrity walkabout, didn't we?
That's right.
But you get first dibs on the comics that was in there.
Yeah, I'm priority.
Did you buy a lot of comics?
Yeah, I used to buy loads. Yeah.
I remember paying £105 for Showcase number 4.
You got it. I remember paying £450 for Showcase number 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's from the same buyer at the same time.
I don't think so.
I didn't actually put my hand in my pocket. It was when I was selling all my Watchmen artwork, and that was one Silver Age issue, because that was the beginning of the Silver Age of American comics, really.
It was.
Yeah. And it was the must-have thing. But I think we probably made... Have you sold yours now?
I have.
Any idea how much you got for it? Did you get more than 150?
Oh, sorry, for that one thing. I sold my entire collection to Silver Acre Collectibles. Right. And they just took them off, and they took 20%. They sold them. I had to sign certificates to say they were from my collection, and they were bagged up somehow. Right. And then they sold them one by one over a period of years, and took 20% and paid me the rest. So I got sort of slabs of money from time to time, but I don't know how much Showcase 4 would have got it. I'll tell you what I did get. I'll tell you what I did have. Julie Schwartz gave me the first Justice League, which was Brave and the Bold 28th, 27th. It was. He signed it to Brian Bolland from Julie, and when they carted off my collection, I completely forgot to mention to him that the thing had been signed by Julie. So somebody might have bought it, and I got a bit of a surprise from that.
Wow.
And I had to, And
sorry,
I had, Julie also gave me was it Mystery in Space #1 to take to you?
No, you're almost right. I have got a copy, because Julie Schwartz, he's the guy who edited The Flash, Green Lantern, Justice League, Hawkman, Strange Adventures, Mystery in Space, and he took a shine to us young Brits, because we were the young Turks, and we all loved his books, and Julie loved that adulation. So whenever we would go to New York, he would let us help ourselves to old file copies. And indeed, one time when you were there, Brian, you were helping yourself, and he said, "Oh, you're good friends with Dave, aren't you?" He said,
"Yes.
You best take some for Dave as well, otherwise Dave will be angry, you know." And
he gave me a little pile, and he said, "Take some for yourself, and then take some for Dave." And I had to choose which. God, I had one of these in my hand, like Mystery in Space #1 or something.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to give it away.
Yeah.
to you?
No, the story I will tell, which is a very self-serving story, but anyway, was that I one day through the post got a copy of Mystery in Space #1 from Julie, and it was really old and beaten up and everything. Mystery in Space #1, and on the inside page he'd written, to Dave Gibbons, a #1 issue for a #1 artist, your pal Julie Schwartz, which is like, Julie,
oh God,
you know, I love you, man. You know, so that was really nice. But what I was going to say, I don't know if you saw in the news recently, but a guy called, I think it's Ian Levine. He's like a Northern Soul DJ. He had every comic that DC ever published, every one.
Good.
Going back to the 30s, including all the romance stuff, the funny stuff, and I think it's going on auction this month. I think it's just got everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
The thing I've discovered about Dan Didio, who was one of the publishers of DC over the last few years, is that he's a real nerd. He's a real fanboy. Yeah. I've always, growing up with Fleetway and all that, I always imagined that the publishers and the people upstairs were a lot of sort of stony-faced people that never would talk to us. But now that Dan Didio has relieved from DC Comics, he's all over Facebook buying up back issues of DC Comics like a real fanboy.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I always thought he was a fanboy, really.
I didn't really know him well enough.
Yeah.
I met him and Jim Lee in London once and took them for a really terrible lunch in Holborn.
Or on purpose?
No, it was a cafe that the people at the Central School of Art used to go to just across the road from Kingsway. And it was okay, but it was absolutely crap. I felt really embarrassed afterwards. But anyway, I didn't really get to know Dan very well.
But talking about Julie Schwartz, there's that 1980s leap to America. You know, lots of people going across to work in America, and I think it was Julie and Karen Berger came over with him as well.
Dick Giordano too.
There you go. To Sweet Talk artists, or to try and get them to come and work for American Comics. I just wondered about you because you've kind of got, from what I recall, you've each got a different experience of that process and how it sort of panned out. The kind of move to America and doing work for the big two. And I just wanted to kind of compare and contrast really what you
consolidated. Yeah, I'd like to know too.
Well, you were on the ground first of all, Brian, weren't you? Because you kind of sneaked in.
Well, I've got my Joe Staten story. Joe came to draw on my wife's drawing table, and he was drawing Green Lantern, and I asked if, he talked Jack C. Harris into letting me do a Green Lantern cover in '79, and it was not an easy thing really to work across the Atlantic Ocean in those days before fax machines and things, was it?
No.
And that worked out okay, and then Dick and Karen coming over to sort of scout for artists started after that. But I think you had actually already done something for Marvel, hadn't you, by then?
Yeah, I did. I did a story through Barry Coker for their black and white magazines, and it's a weird thing. I mean, that was 40 years ago. I can't even do the maths, But it was done in half tone, but it was never published in the black and white magazine.
So what year would that have been?
Probably 73 or something like that.
Oh,
and it eventually saw print in a colour comic where they took this half-tone artwork and just shot it as line work, which meant everything just filled up with black. And then I thought no more about it until about maybe 10 years ago. I got the artwork back one day. I got the entire artwork in pristine condition. So that was technically in print, but I think the first significant thing I did for the Americans was after DC recruited us. And I remember going up with you, Mick. We went up to some hotel in London where it was Dick Giordano and Joe Orlando.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and they sort of, they didn't have to do much sweet talking because everything they offered us was superior. We would get our artwork back, we'd get reprint money, we'd get more money, we'd even get the board to draw it on. So and we were. I don't know so much about Mick, but because you were never primarily an American comics fan, but for me, that had always been my aspiration. And years before, I'd gone to DC with my samples and been turned away. So to me, it was great, you know, at last. I don't know about you, Mick. You were a bit more ambivalent about it, were you?
Yeah, well, Joe Orlando wanted me to draw one of his Atari books. I don't know if you remember, they were doing these things based on Atari games. And there was a bit of argy-bargy about how we go about it, which I wasn't very keen on, so I didn't take it any further.
Didn't Jose Luis Garcia Lopez end up doing Atari?
He did Atari Force, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
He's a bloody good artist, isn't he?
He is the best, yeah.
He's a master, isn't he?
I remember that Dick Giordano had said when we went along to see him, bring the thing that you're working on at the moment. And I remember showing him what exactly it was that I was working on at the moment. And it was a future shop for 2000 AD, and it appeared as a spread, as the centre of the comic. And it was written by Alan, and it was all about Billy the Squid and the Clone Ranger. And I remember Dick looking at it and not really knowing what to say, because he couldn't compute it, you know. And it was just some stupid thing about the bad guys riding into town. It was Billy the Squid, and it was a squid on the back of a horse, and he terrorizes the townsfolk, and then all is lost, and then bum bum bum, it's the Clone Ranger, who is of course the Lone Ranger times 50, and kicks the squid's ass, you know. But
and was this in 2000 AD?
It was, yeah. But Dick was mystified. I mean, he sort of made the right noises, but I knew he didn't get it.
I mean, for a while during Vertigo and Karen Berger's time, they were really interested in a lot of people at 2000 AD. Well, it seemed to be the source of the English talent going over to America. But is it so much now, Michael?
There's quite a few. I mean, if you look at Rob Williams, Al Ewing, it's mostly writers, but also a few artists. Simon Spurrier, of course, started at 2000 AD as well.
Right.
I'm trying to think of Mike Dowling.
Gosh, I'm so embarrassed to say I don't know a lot of these names at all.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's all.
They all speak highly of you, Brian.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
But it is interesting, particularly in the last sort of 10, 15 years. There's been a new kind of group of British creators who've gone to America and worked for Vertigo.
I mean, there isn't Vertigo anymore, is there? I mean,
no, it's mostly comics. It's mostly companies like Image, Boom.
Oh yeah,
things like that. There's a lot of work going on over there. But yeah, it's kind of like a little mini British invasion. I mean, at the time when this was happening, because I was talking to David Roach, and he said, "Oh, be sure to ask whether you guys felt like," and I'm quoting him here, "you were moving into the big leagues with American work, or whether you would just." There was a sense of excitement because you know, particularly Dave and Brian, you were fans of it. Was there a sense of kind of moving up, or was it just?
I got a sense of it when I was given Camelot 3000 because they flew me over there and they took me. I did an interview with what was the name of the magazine? I did a picture of me being interviewed by Judge Dredd on the cover of it. He's sort of sticking a microphone in my face. And the media was all over the place. And then, of course, we were at San Diego Comic Convention doing a kind of promotional thing. And it was like being a movie star. And compared to the way it had been, I'm afraid, at 2000 AD with Fleetway, it was completely different. So it was a seismic change when that happened for me.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I also think it's true to say that at the time, Fleetway probably treated its artists and writers appallingly as far as any sort of proper recompense was. I mean,
I remember when we were trying to get our artwork returned to us, we used to phone up people, and we would be given, we would get to talk to the secretary of the person we wanted to speak to, and we weren't really allowed access to, I can't even remember the names of these people, but they seemed to be up in the clouds somewhere, these people, and they didn't treat us very well.
We had this thing at the time called the Society of Strip Illustration, which was a sort of a professional comic book person's monthly meeting that never really achieved very much, although socially it was great. That used to be another place where we socialised, and we'd have like a guest speaker sometimes. And one week we got the guy who was the legal something or other for Fleetway, or probably IPC magazines as it was then. And the question came up, why don't we get our artwork back? He said, well, we can't give it to you back. He said, because all you do would be to make small changes to it and resubmit it the next week. Which is so ignorant of the whole process of comics. It was just laughable. People just fell on the floor, you know, begging for mercy, laughing their heads off when he didn't get it. I mean, I could see that maybe magazine illustration, if you bided your time, you could slap a quick moustache on somebody and send it in later, you know. But you can't do comics. So
I don't think it works that way, does it?
No. So there was an appalling degree of ignorance, and we were definitely the low people on the totem pole, whereas at DC you were made to feel that you were of value, you know. And I mean, I'd have done it anyway, even if the money hadn't been much better and all the other things, because it was my boyhood ambition to do it.
Me too.
So everything was kind of gravy, you know. Although, having said that as well, I did used to like the camaraderie of the Westminster Arms, you know, that sort of fellow fan feeling. Whereas I discovered with some of the American artists and writers, who I won't name, they did think that they were slightly superior. And
there was some big egos there, weren't there?
And that never quite worked for me. But no, it was great. I mean, it was obviously a very good career step for most of the people who took it, you know.
Yeah. Just following up on what you just said about the camaraderie, I like getting a sense of what particularly 2000 AD was like in the early days when you know, everybody was around. So, you know, you mentioned Kev O'Neill, you mentioned Robin Smith, you know, going into the office, Mick not necessarily knowing who everybody was. And
Colin Wyatt was there.
Colin Wyatt,
Colin.
Jan Shepherd was there.
Yeah.
I'd like to get your recollections of just the atmosphere, the way people talked, what it felt like to be there at that time when you'd got the driving forces like Pat and John, who were pushing things in a direction that clearly appealed to you all.
Yeah, I've never got to know writers. You know, I always think that artists and writers exist in completely different realms, and I never really, I always feel too shy to ever really approach John. I always thought John was scary, although he's not really.
Get him on a bad day, he can be quite scary.
Really. Dave?
No, I was going to say, just to jump in again, that I think amongst the three of us, I was probably the only one who had the experience of working for like old school Fleetway when they used to be in Farringdon Road. And the school that I went to, the secondary school that I went to, was a kind of Victorian wannabe public school. And the Fleetway offices were very much like that. They had the high windows and they were quite dark rooms. And you'd have the editor behind his big wooden desk. And the Buster, which is where I first worked, was edited by a guy called Len Wen, which is kind of weird. Not Len Wein, the American, but Len Wen. And he was ex-services. And he wore a sports jacket with a tie every day, with leather patches on his elbows, smoked a pipe, and he was the editor, and everybody deferred to him. And there would be a sub-editor who you know, did the actual hands-on hard work of it. Then you'd have an art editor and an assistant art editor, and each comic had that team. And
so where was this, Dave?
It was in Farringdon Road. It was sort of quite close to Holborn Viaduct.
Oh, right.
It was quite close to where Barry Coker's offices were. In fact, that's why Barry had his offices there, because it was just a short walk. So it was literally old school. It was very fusty. But then when I went to King's Reach Tower, I met Pat, as I mentioned before. It was a big open plan place, and 2000 AD had its kind of corner of it, where there was Pat ranting on at the top of his voice and effing and jeffing about everything and laughing and chucking things about, and, you know, dirty looks from all the more traditional people. So it had a completely different anarchic kind of feel to it. So
they were on the 20th floor, weren't they?
Yeah.
I seem to remember.
So it did feel completely different from the establishment. You know, it felt more like it was more like, and I think later they were on the same floor as the New Musical Express, which had a similar kind of anarchic feel to it, because they were a bunch of.
I once rode up in the lift. I once rode up in the lift with Mick Farron, who was he was in a group called the Deviants.
Yeah, I used to know Mick, actually.
You used to know him?
Yeah.
Okay.
He, in fact, me and him were going to do a comic together, but we never ever got around to it. It might have been quite interesting. Because he was the editor of International Times, where I got one of my early, just like you had your stuff published in Oz, didn't you, in Time Out?
Yeah, I did.
Some of my early stuff was in International Times.
And Mick was behind that, was he?
He was the editor of it at one point.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
He was an interesting bloke, and he became a science fiction writer. He became a pretty popular.
Did he?
He would have fitted perfectly into 2000 AD.
Would he?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he lived a long time. I mean, he's only been dead a short while, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I suppose he was busy doing other things.
I think so, yeah. So what's your take on it, Mick?
Well, like you said, it was like they seemed to be sort of shoehorned into the corner, didn't they, on the 20th floor? And everything was covered in artwork and scripts and all the rest of it. And then Jan was round the corner with no room at all, I thought, to do all the art stuff. And Kevin was sitting at like an old school desk, it looked like. I probably wasn't, that's how I remember him. Sort of wedged in a corner, like right outside Pat's office. Well, they weren't offices really; they were just sort of screened off, weren't they? So,
yeah.
But it was.
Was there another guy called somebody Preston working there?
Roy Preston, yeah.
Roy Preston, that's right.
Yeah.
Was he? What did he do?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think he was. But I tell you who else.
He was a nice chap.
But I tell you who else you used to see who was absolutely pivotal to the early success and look of 2000 AD was Doug Church.
Oh, Doug, yeah.
He used to design a lot of the covers, and he also designed some of the Dan Dare pages that I did. This when we were doing the centre spread. He would quite often do a rough layout, and he had a brilliant vision, and he was a really, really strong graphic designer. Again, somebody weird, a bit like Steve Parkhouse, who was like an unsung behind-the-scenes hero, you know?
One of the things that I've been fascinated to discover when I went to interview Robin Smith, I think a couple of years ago, was the notes that he would send to cover artists, so to Mick and to Brian, I presume Dave as well, with a rough, well, sometimes not so rough layout of actually what he wanted as art editor. And I'm kind of curious as to how welcome they were, to receive this, saying this is exactly what we want. This is where the cover furniture is going to go. Did you guys as cover artists appreciate the art editor doing that, or was it more kind of, oh no, I want to do what I want to do?
Well, I used to quite welcome it actually, because it's something I still get. When I'd send the cover off, if I designed it myself, and I didn't hear anything for a couple of days, I'd start thinking, oh, it's coming back. Whereas if I just followed what they wanted, then I could relax straight away once I finished it. I mean, of course, none of them ever did come back, but I still thought they might. So.
Yeah.
I don't remember getting much direction from anybody when I first started doing covers. I mean, for a long time, I was just doing covers on spec, and then they wrote a little column story on the inside.
Oh, those are the kind of super covers where it was a story didn't reference anything that was in the issue. I mean, because there's that amazing one you did, Brian, which was the astronaut who's got the kind of alien frog inside.
He's got a frog in his helmet. Yes, yeah. I really don't know where that came from. Because I still got a few sort of pencil roughs of cover ideas from that period that were rejected. So I was just coming up with anything that came into my head, and they'd say, "Well, we like that one more than that one."
That's right. I mean, I remember it was back at the beginning that Doug Church would do really quite finished roughs, and I never minded following those because they were really well done, and it solved half the problems for you, because half of it is what am I going to draw and where am I going to draw it? That's the difficult bit of it anyway. And actually drawing it is relatively simple. But I do recall later on that they would say, "Oh, can you do us a couple of covers?" That they basically inventory until they didn't have a cover that related to a story inside, and they just slot it in. And I did one. It was a load of spacemen with like monsters coming in, and there was another one where it was just like an alien dragon, and it was really, if it looked a reasonably interesting image, as Brian said, they just say, "We'll just do it and finish it, and we'll just slot it in when we haven't got a regular cover."
Because for a long time, I don't think 2000 AD knew that Judge Dredd was the lead character in the comic, because he wasn't on the cover for many issues, was he, at the beginning? But no, he's the poster boy.
I think it was the Kong cover. I think.
Oh yes, that's him, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who drew that?
I'm just about to find out.
Okay.
Not Kong, Krong.
Okay, so
is that issue 5? Is issue 5?
Yeah, I just Krong.
That was drawn by Barry Mitchell.
Well, the cover was it? The story was drawn by Carlos. So.
Really?
This is my
one with the big monkey
letting me down massively.
Yeah,
and that had Dredd on it, did it? Oh, but hang on, there was that one where, what was that one where Dredd standing with a whole load of heads growing out of a field?
Yeah, it was drawn by Don Lawrence.
Don Lawrence, yeah.
Don Lawrence, yes.
Yeah. And they took one of Carlos's original strip figures and stuck it on the field.
That's right.
So it's Don Lawrence's heads and Carlos's Dredd. So.
And so what was so awful about it that they had to censor it?
I think I can't remember my full power overload, but I think it was just they thought it was a bit freaky.
Yeah. Okay.
Cover. So they they removed the old lady who was farming the heads and put in Judge Dredd instead.
Oh right, I see.
Yeah. Prog 5 was Barry Mitchell, and that was I mean Dredd's very small in that. Well done, Dave. And then I think the first kind of proper one. So I'm just going off my phone, which is...
Throughout this, I've been looking on my screen, trying to find the photos I have of us in the offices at 2000 AD, because I've got a few, and I don't know where they've got to. At the moment, I've got a big photo of Dave sitting on the sofa in my flat with Len Wein.
Good choice.
Good choice.
It brightens the place up, Brian. Brings some much-needed levity. Yeah, look at that. What a lovely boy. Look at me. I'm a child. Good God.
All that hair, Dave.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, is that the time? God, we've been at this for nearly 2 hours.
That period, 2000. This is the 2080 podcast. At the end of the day, we can talk about American work and everything since, but to get a sense of your feelings at the time about 2008, particularly around that time when Dave and Brian, you went off to America. Mick, your experience of working for America has been different. You did some Batman, did Last America and things like that. I wanted to get the sense of your emotions at the time, because particularly when you read something like Brideshead Revisited. Not Brideshead Revisited, Tharg's Head Revisited.
I didn't do that. Doug Church did that.
You get a sense that there was a little bit of anger there. But so I wanted to get an idea from you guys of
Are you sure you want to leave it on this note, Mike?
Well, I mean, hey,
we absolutely fucking hated it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I'm just curious, because the Future Shock documentary touched on it and touched on some of the some of the feelings at the time, but kind of had to skip over
well,
it.
You brought up that page we drew where we aired our grievances on a page, didn't we? Dave, were you in that?
I was, yeah. I mean, I had no major grievances, but because I think, but particularly you people who had worked on Judge Dredd, you know, you didn't get a good deal, and well, there's all sorts of stories told about it. And as I say, I was an outsider for that, but yeah, I mean, inevitably you get a lot of artistic egos working on something, and people get crossed, and you have a slightly less than sympathetic management style coming down from above. People are going to get angry. I think it was amazing that stuff saw print, and it was, in a way, it was really true to the spirit of 2000 AD. I just think they were sort of less enlightened days, and I thought it was good that everybody used their artwork to express the way they felt, and they got it published as well. It was really an achievement.
I can remember.
I thought one. Sorry.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say what used to frustrate me really was that the work was great. It was really interesting and great, lovely, loved doing it. And somehow in the back of my mind, I knew that there might not be any more work like this in the future somehow, because it was sort of a lot of really nice stuff to work on. And at the same time, you were trapped in this kind of sort of medieval sort of management style that just didn't allow for any give or take at all. I mean, you were I remember once Kevin did a Roadbusters, and I remember the Greasy Gracies. He did a picture of all these robots, and how long it would take him. And apparently, I think it was someone, was it Bartholomew? Were they put a biro through it? Said, "Oh, I'm not having that. I'm actually on the artwork." So
what?
That was what the mindset that you would. So you felt like you were like completely in the wrong place. You know, like you thought, "Oh, I don't belong here." It's like madness.
And it was a very traditional place, even after the days of being in the Victorian style Farringdon Road. It was old school. We're the people who know how to do comics. This is how comics are done. They're named after racing cars or fighter planes, and we have a football strip. And I think they really just didn't understand 2000 AD. I mean, fortunately, we live in more enlightened times now, but I think it was just the feeling of, it wasn't a good fit for any of us really at the time, not for them and not for us. And I mean, I've always had very good relationships with 2000 AD, but I felt it was when I left, it was time to leave, really, you know.
Brian, what's your feelings on it?
Well, I've got good memories of the whole. I mean, we did have these grievances about not getting the artwork back and the management not wanting to talk to us and treating us badly, but my overall feeling of the time was good, and I don't feel I've ever really left, because I would still occasionally do a cover or something, but maybe, well, I shouldn't commit myself, but I don't feel I ever really left.
Yeah, I know how you feel. Yeah, because I mean, it's still part of me that I don't have any sort of grudges against them or anything like that at all. So it's just, whenever they ask me to do something, I usually say yes. So.
And I think, you know, the people at 2000 have been very decent, that we've gone swanning off to America and, you know, got, you know, famous and all that sort of bollocks, but they're still quite happy to allow us to grace the pages occasionally, aren't they?
Well, and then, but the actual staff on the comic weren't like that, were they? I mean, they were really nice. I mean, I remember once I went in there and they said, "Oh, you can have a lot of your artwork back." I thought, "Oh, great." And they said, "But you've got to take it now." Oh. So it was like a huge parcel with double-page spreads and all this. And I said, "Well, I can't really take it. I'm at the moment, after I've delivered this, I'm going down to Highbury to buy a ticket for an FA Cup semi-final, and I'm going to have to queue for a couple of hours." I said, "Oh, you've got to take it now." You know? So I queued around Highbury for, like I said, for about 3 hours, holding this artwork. And those were the days when, to buy a ticket for a match, you had to go through the turnstiles. And so I had to ask a policeman to hold this artwork for me while I went in to get this ticket. And luckily, he saw the funny side of it, as they say. And
did he know what it was?
No, I just said, I've got this parcel. I can't get it through the turnstile. Oh, don't worry, sir. I'll look after that for you.
Well, I seem to remember when the
punchline though is that the next day I got a phone call saying we need all that artwork back. We shouldn't have given it.
And don't tell me Arsenal lost.
No, they didn't. They won.
Oh, all right. Unusual.
Playing, but it was only Leyton Orient in the semi-finals.
Oh, well then.
I mean, look, but I seem to remember with Leyton Orient.
I seem to remember that we were required to pay to have transparencies made of our artwork. We had to list them, catalogue them, tell them what the page numbers were, and then pay to have transparencies made of all the artwork that was being returned to us. And I hadn't got the time to do that, so Mike Lake did it for me.
Yeah. That's right. No, I mean, I must say, I've only got good memories of 2000 AD. And I think it did come along at just the right time for us and our contemporaries. And it certainly was, we were on the wave of the change. You know, the old school clearly was falling away. And then, of course,
I think we've got Star Wars to thank for it, haven't we? Because 1977 was Star Wars,
Yeah. And indeed, you know, Kelvin Gosnell, who by that time really was the editor, he took me along to a press screening of Star Wars at the Dominion in Tottenham Court Road at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning. And I remember coming out of the movie thinking, my God, the world has changed. And we were in the right place for that, which is why they converted Dan Dare into being like a Star Warsy thing with an evil empire and all that stuff. So maybe because science fiction traditionally doesn't sell very well in comics, surprisingly, that was a matter of timing. So I think it was
Kelvin's memo because he read an article about this forthcoming science fiction movie, and he wrote a memo to the management and said, "We need to get in on this." That kind of eventually through Pat's hands and et cetera, kind of 2000 AD happened. So I mean, you're not wrong, Brian.
Well, I thought it was all down to Star Wars. The fact that I mean, it was football comics and sort of, I always say Napoleonic war stories comics, because I had to draw some samples of that. And there wasn't any science fiction in comics at the time, and it was just because Star Wars came along, wasn't it? Are you going to edit this down a bit? Are you going to edit out all the crap and all the sort of pauses and the nonsense?
No.
It's going to just be those are the best bits. Okay.
I got you all on to talk nonsense. That's the appeal of this.
Well, you can rely on us for that.
No, it's been great. I thank you so much for this. I really appreciate you taking the time, because it's been what I wanted more than anything was to get the three of you on and just chatting, and that's exactly what you've done. And you know, there's been some really nice bits in there, which is exactly what.
Well, I really enjoyed it, Mike. It was good. It was a real nice social thing to do, and you know, I hope people enjoy watching it. You know.
Yeah,
brilliant, lovely. Well, I'll let you get on with your days. So, thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you,
Brian. Press leave. Press leave.
Where's that? Is that over there?
Well, the miracle of technology, Earthlet's three legends on one call. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. It was a privilege and a pleasure to be able to sit there and just listen to them chat away and occasionally ask a little question. So apologies for me being there at all, really. So thank you to Brian and to Mick and to Dave for doing that. It was absolutely fascinating and a joy to listen to. So we're going to be continuing to broadcast from the sub basement of the 2000 AD Nerve Centre throughout lockdown. We've got more deep dives, more guests. We'll be talking about the Smash special. We're talking about stuff that's coming up in 2000 AD. Don't forget that next week it's the second of this year's all ages regened specials that go out as part of the normal prog. 52 pages, some really nice stuff in there. So even if all ages doesn't necessarily appeal to you, pick it up, have a read. There's some cracking work in there. You know, you've got Cadet Dredd, you've got Strontium Dog, you've got Anderson, you've got Finder and Keeper, which is proving very popular, and Future Shock, of course. And then a couple of weeks after that, Full Tilt Boogie begins its full run in the normal prog. This was Alex de Campi and Eduardo Acana's series that went down very well when it was in a previous regened issue. So it's great to see that get a full series in the normal prog. Looking forward to it. Don't forget you can get in touch with the 2000 AD Thrillcast at thrillcast@2000ad.com. That's all one word, thrillcast@2000ad.com. We shall be back later this week for more deep dives, more interviews. We're just going to keep going. Making sure that your lockdown is suitably thrill-powered. Make sure that you are taking care of one another and yourselves as things begin to open up a little bit more. The risk is still there. We want to make sure that at the end of all of this, you're still with us. So make sure you look after yourselves, and we shall see you in a few days. Splundig Verthrig, Earthlets.
Alert! 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 Fill power levels dangerously high. Alert! Alert! Read 2000 AD every week. Ask your comic book store or newsagent now. Subscribe to the galaxy's greatest comic at 2000adonline.com.